Ignatius, I see you talking there. Just a heads up, you're on mute if you're trying
Sorry.
to talk to us.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
it's fun to make
Hi, good
sure. I don't know if you
afternoon,
were
everyone.
talking to.
I'd just like to welcome all of you to our CAWASA Wednesday webinar series. And today we are pleased to have the ABC, the Association of Boards of Certification of the US, who CAWASA is the agent for the ABC in the Caribbean region. And I think this is a very good session to give you an education on the importance of certification. So this afternoon we have with us Mr. John Solvie, who is the manager of the Clark County Water Quality in Las Vegas, Nevada, overseeing Southern Nevada's area-wide water quality management plan and stormwater regulatory program. His background includes 30 years of regulatory experience in wastewater, stormwater, pretreatment, and groundwater, and 20 years of professional credentialing experience in wastewater and drinking water principles. John chairs the Association of Boards of Certification, ABC Certification Commission for Environmental Professionals, setting psychometric standards and administering ABC's professional operator program nationally and internationally. He has also served on the Nevada Certification Board for many years, administering regulatory and non-regulatory operator certification programs in Nevada. He is a past president of the ABC and recipient of the Harris F. Siedel Lifetime Achievement Award for his contribution to advancing the cause of certifying environmental professionals, and also recipient of the Nevada Water Environment Association Lifetime Service Award. And John was here in 2019 with us in St. Lucia for the CAWASA Water Operators Conference. And we are pleased to have you back with us this afternoon to share with us quite a bit of your knowledge and experience. Over to you, John. Your sound is gone. Your mic is gone.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I think
Okay.
I'm back now.
All right.
So, okay. I'm trying to share my screen. I think you need to give me permission.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, we got all the devils with us today.
Okay, is that working for everybody?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Ignatius, for those kind words. That was very gracious of you. It's wonderful to be here. I hope this finds each one of you doing well and healthy to you and your families. I think we can agree that this past year has been one for the books. When I was there in 2018, none of us anticipated what the next year and a half was going to bring all of us. Oh, you know, it's been quite a time, but we've pressed through and here we are. I really enjoyed spending a lot of time with you guys when I was there at the CAWASA conference. Some things I really picked up was that for all the Caribbean island nations, you're a very welcoming people. You made me feel completely at home from the moment I got there to the time that I left. You're very passionate people. You're passionate about what you do. You enjoy what you do. You are passionate about public health and protecting the environment. And one of the unique things I saw is that you always find a way of making things work with whatever resources that you have on hand. Very ingenuitive. I was really impressed with your operators, the way that you work together, the way you problem solve together. It's really a great thing for you guys. Also wanted to introduce, I've got some ABC staff backing me up today. We've got Paul Bishop, our CEO. We've also got Tom and Haley and Lisa and Michelle from staff. So if there's ever a time you want to throw questions our way as far as ABC, this is really the time to go ahead and do that. You can either ask your question in the chat window, we can get to that at the end, or you can go ahead and ask us questions. And if there are questions I can't answer that are better fielded by staff would be happy to weigh in. So what we're talking about today is right on the slide you see in front of you, which is the value of certification. And I'll be the first to empathize with you that certification can often be frustrated with operators. I've heard from operators through the past 20 years, why do I need this? I know what I'm doing, and nobody is questioning that operators don't know what they're doing, because we know that they're very good at what they do. But the role of certification, and we'll be talking about more about this as we get into this webinar, is really validating your competence to be able to operate. And through doing that, it provides assurances, not necessarily just for you and your employer, but for the public. The public needs assurance that they're going to have clean water and that the environment is going to be protected. And all it takes is a few bad occurrences to happen to give the entire industry a black eye. I'm sure most, if not all of you, are already familiar with what happened in Walkerton, Canada, when all of those people died a number of years ago. Flint, Michigan, more recently, with the amount of deaths that occurred with lead in the drinking water. Things like that that come up shatter public confidence, and that shattering of public confidence often lasts for years. And the role of certification, and the role, when I say a certifier, I put on my certifier hat, I'm tasked with the responsibility of validating your competency to perform, not only now, but in the future. So a quick overview of what we're going to be touching on here today. The topics we're going to hit on are going to be certificate versus certification programs. They're very different, but they all fall under a single umbrella, and we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the importance of recertification. That causes some frustration with operators at times, wondering why they have to do that. We'll touch on the evolution of certification, which I think will help you understand where the industry came from back in the 1970s until today, and what's really driving the standards that we need to follow as a certification industry. And I'm also going to touch on the professional operator program, which I discussed at length when I was with you back in 2019. Get my cursor here. Okay, the first thing we're going to touch on is the difference between certificate and certification programs. And I thought this was an important topic to be able to hit on, because it's a question that comes up almost every time I'm speaking with operators about programs. Anytime operators are frustrated with exams and wondering, why does it have to be like it is?
Yes.
That's not making sense. See, I'm hearing some background noise, so if you're able to mute your mics, this would be probably a good thing to do.
Yes, go the weakest person, yeah? Somebody without showing no kind of enthusiasm. There you go. Quick, let's go.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll try to keep on going here. What we have when we talk about certification, certificate programs, even licensing, they fall under this big umbrella, and the big umbrella is called licensing, or I'm sorry, credentialing. And all under this credentialing umbrella, there are subsets of credentialing. And what I'm primarily here for, and what I do when I talk about myself as a certifier, is a certification programs. And there are also certificate programs. And you as operators are involved in both. And both serve a very vital role, and both are very important, but there are some distinct differences between them that it's important to understand. And I think it will help settle in your mind why certification programs need to operate the way that they do. So let's go ahead and start, first of all, with certificate programs. And this is different than the certification that we typically issue. When you're a certified grade 2 or class 2 wastewater or drinking water operator or distribution operator, that's not what we're talking about here. These are certificate programs. And the key component of a certificate programs is that it validates an educational process. It doesn't validate on-the-job experience. It doesn't validate that you can go out and I tell you there's a problem with this pump. There's a problem with this process. You need to go out and make adjustments to that process. A certificate program doesn't validate your competency to be able to go and adjust those things properly. It simply validates that you completed an educational process. That could be a multi-year process like a high school or a college education. It could be a one-day pump course that you're taking. Those are educational process. Number two, it indicates completion of a course or training. As I said, it could be schooling. I'm sure most of you have high school diplomas. That's actually a certificate program. Many of you have completed different trainings. Some of them might be here on these webinars. Those are certificate programs. A key component of certificate programs also is that the certificate is owned by the holder that has that certificate, and it cannot be revoked. And when you think about the nature of certificate programs, it makes perfect sense. If I went and took a 3-day pump course and I passed an exam and I earned this certificate, there is no act that I can do that somebody is going to come in and say, we're going to revoke that certificate. That's no longer any good. In the same way, if I earned a high school diploma, that high school diploma is mine for the rest of my life. There's no act I couldn't, if I went and committed a criminal act, my high school diploma would not be revoked because I own the diploma. The educational institution does not own it. The content for certificate program is typically developed by a faculty or a committee. In other words, it's scholastically based. You have a series, you have a course you have to complete. And when you complete that course and you take the necessary exam, you earn that certificate. Another key component of certificate programs that sets them apart from certification programs is there's no ongoing requirements to maintain. Using my high school diploma as an example, I'm not going to tell you what year I graduated because then you're going to know how old I am. But if you have a high school diploma, 40 years later, there's no requirement that I have to prove that I had enough knowledge when I was in high school to be able to earn that high school diploma. I earned it, it's mine forever. Now, are certificates valuable? Absolutely. They're a key component of operators operating in the field. I know operators that have done training for many years and they hold dozens of certificates. That says a lot to an employer. That says a lot to an employer when you're going for a job opportunity, a promotion, an advancement, to be able to show that you have these certificates. They help your on-the-job experience. They can serve as educational components of certification programs. So they serve a very valuable component, but they are not certification programs. So let's go ahead and move on and touch on the differences with certification programs. These are very different than what we just talked about on the previous slide with certificate programs. Certification programs validate competency to function independently in the field. It's not just validating your book or your training knowledge. This is one of the biggest frustrations I get from operators when they say, there's something wrong with the exam process because I studied the books that are the recommended study books and I can't pass the exam, therefore the exam is flawed. No, it's because the validation process that occurs in a certification program isn't whether or not you know information in the book, but whether or not you can actually go into the field and you can actually troubleshoot and make things work. It's an assessment process that requires an acceptable combination. 3 things. It's really the 3 pillars of what we call certification. You have an education component, relevant experience component, and once you have those first 2 pillars, then the examination validates your education and your experience. It's why we see that people like engineers get frustrated that they can't become certified, because they don't have the relevant experience. They may have plenty of education, but we are validating the experience to be able to operate in the field. It indicates demonstration of required competencies. And I'll talk a little bit more about where those competencies come from and how they're established. Different from a certificate program, they're awarded by a credentialing body. And because they're awarded by a credentialing body, they're also owned by that same credentialing body, and they can be revoked for cause. So when you have a certification hanging on your wall, that's what I would call a privilege to be able to have. Because if you do something unethical, typically most problems that come up with operators and certification programs are violation of ethics. And if you violate a program's ethics, you can have your certification revoked for cause, whether that's through an administrative process or through a legal process. So you don't own that. That's something that for as long as you have that, that's owned by the actual credentialing body. Now the standards, if you remember, we talked about certificate programs for certificates are established by a staff or a faculty. The standards for certification programs are set through an industry-wide psychometric process. I'll explain what that means here in a little bit, and incorporates field experience subject matter experts. Certification programs are not developed by educators that just go down and sit in a room. That's what I thought 30 years ago. I thought a group of people just sat around a table that were staff members and just drew this up and said, this is what we'll do. It's done through a process that can be airtight, and it needs to be airtight. And I'll talk about the reasons for that, not only from a professional level and assuring the public, but for legal liability that falls on programs because of the power that they have to administer certifications and take away certifications. And different from certificate programs, there's ongoing requirements to maintain that. Typically what we call continuing education. Not going to touch on that here because I've got a slide coming up that we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And I did want to delineate a little bit on the exams, because if there's anything a certification program gets criticized for, it's exams. We don't like your exams. There's something wrong with the exams. And again, part of that is because it requires competency to operate in the field. And what I found, if you're looking at certification exams, just to give you a very high level 50,000-foot flyby, the grade 1 and 2 exams are a little bit more straightforward. Your math in a grade 1, grade 2 exam is going to be volume, flow, dose. It's going to be pretty clear cut what you have to do. The testing rates, the passing rates for grades 3 and 4 tend to sharply decline. And the reason for that is because grade 3 and 4, passing those exams requires a lot more than just book knowledge to be able to pass. You have to have experience on those processes to be able to understand. You're asked questions to say, this is happening, there's foaming, the bacteria count is doing this, what action do you take? There's no way that we could tell you to go to a California State University Sacramento manual, page 342, and that'll tell you what to do. It's located in all different parts of the manuals as far as the items that need to be done, but you need to have experience to be able to understand what needs to happen. And that's the biggest thing we run into. And whether you work at a small facility or a large facility, I think you both face the same amount of challenges. Small facilities face challenges that they don't have highly complex processes, so they don't have those processes on site. And that's why plant classification is typically tied to certification. To say, if I'm working at a class 2 plant, I cannot test past grade 2 certification. And then some people at small plants have told me that people at large plants have a greater advantage because of all the processes that they work on. That may be true to some extent. Large plants run into probably the same amount of challenges, in that in a large plant, you can have somebody that works in one small segment of that plant for 20 years. They're doing nothing but solids processing. They're not doing process adjustment or anything else. It reminds me a little bit, many years ago, I was in the Air Force. And when you tested for promotion, you would be asked about things that you weren't completely familiar with. I worked in what was called Tactical Air Command, which was filled with fighter aircraft. And well, the test included a lot of information from Strategic Air Command, which was large-scale bombers, which we didn't have experience with. So you studied your head off to try to get to try to gain some of that. My point being that you work on a certain amount of processes, and when you're asked a question about that process, for you, it's pretty elementary to answer. So the more vast and the more broad experience you can gain, the more advantageous you're going to be at passing exams. And not only that, you're going to be far more valuable to your employer, and you're going to be far more valuable to earning promotions down the road. So the next one we're going to talk about is recertification. And to be straight, I specifically use that word, although most people, we talk about certification renewals. My certification expires next year and I need to renew. The testing industry has really gotten away from the term renewal. And when you think about renewal, I jokingly say a renewal is like a magazine subscription. You fill out a form, you stick your check in it, and you drop it into your envelope, and you're good for another 2 years, and you get your magazines for the next 2 years. That's renewal. Recertification is really what is going on here. In other words, what I talked about, that the role of certifiers is not only to validate competence, but they need to revalidate that competence on an ongoing basis. If you're an old school operator that earned your certification back in 1991, and you're up for renewal here in 2021, the skills, knowledge, and abilities that you had in 1991 would not be considered acceptable for you to be certified in 2021. So you need to revalidate that. And if we want to do that from a pure forensic point, the easy way to do that would simply to make everybody retest every 2-year or every 3-year cycle that they have a certification program. It'd be very easy to say, okay, every 2 years you just have to test and you need to pass the test. I can encourage you that not a single program does that. Not a single certification program in the drinking water and wastewater industry do that. But certifiers are required to come up with what is considered an alternate path, an equivalent path to be able to determine whether or not the person is still competent to operate. And the path that's used by wastewater and drinking water certification programs, as well as other credentialing programs, is continuing education. There's a continuing education program that's in place that says, we're not going to make you test in 2 years, but within this 2-year window, you need to take X amount of continuing education in order to revalidate your knowledge for you to be able to earn being recertified again in 2 or 3 years. And that means that the amount of continuing education that's required by a credentialing agency should equate to the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you're required to possess to pass the current exam. That's a big challenge, but that's why programs set out what's called relevancy criteria with their continuing education. In other words, we are not going to recertify you because you took 5 safety classes. You took CPR, you took first aid, you took these different classes. Those are all great, but those are not relevant to secure your technical knowledge. So what most programs will do is they're going to have an approval process that if you want to take a course or you want to take a webinar, like the series of webinars that Ignatius is offering here with CAWASA, those are typically pre-approved for continuing education credit. So you would take those, and all of those would then be submitted at the end of your cycle to be able to be recertified. If you don't complete that, well, then you can't earn recertification, and/or the certification program is a disciplinary process in place to bring that person back into back into compliance. And what I'm talking about applies to anybody that I know that holds a professional credential, whether it's an operator, whether it's an engineer, whether it's an accountant, it's a nurse, it's an attorney, it's a doctor. We can talk about all the different professions out there. If you have a certification, You have to accomplish something to be able to be recertified again in 2 or 3 years. And that's the reason for it. So I hope this helps people understand the difference between earning a certificate, which is just a validation of book knowledge, versus earning a certification, which there's so much responsibility that lies with certification boards and certification programs that we're essentially saying, you are competent to operate in a manner that we feel is going to adequately protect public health. We're not going to have a Legionnaire's disease outbreak. We are not going to have bacteria that's going to cause sickness. We're not going to have something come out the effluent that's going to do fish kills. Those are important factors, and that's why certification programs have become a hallmark primary component of any program that's operating, especially in what we call the 4 core disciplines. And when I refer to 4 core, I'm talking about drinking water treatment, drinking water distribution, wastewater treatment, and wastewater collection. That covers the gamut of the drinking water and the wastewater industries. There are also other certifications that are mandated in certain jurisdictions and are optional in other jurisdictions for plant maintenance, for laboratory quality analysts, for people doing inspections. There's a lot of different certifications out there, but the 4 core is what you'll find most common in any city, any state, any province, any country in the world that's doing drinking water and wastewater treatment. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the evolution of certification. And I think it's important to touch on this. I think for me, I could talk about this stuff all day with a group of people because it's really enjoyable. The field of certification is a fascinating field with a lot of ins and outs, and I'm just going to provide a high-level flyby of what things were like in the old days. Why can't we do what we did in the old days? And was there anything wrong with what we did? Why did we have to change to what we're doing today? Now, if we go back many years ago, like back to the 1960s and 1970s, you had just a group of people that sat around and created an exam. If you were creating a wastewater treatment exam, you'd sit around a table and say, hey, I think we should ask some trickling filter questions. We know there's some trickling filters out there. Great, let's ask 4 trickling filter questions. Now, is there anything wrong with that? No, I think there was good intent, but there were no standards. There was nothing that said that a certification program needs to fulfill a certain amount of components. And you need to remember, especially in today's society, certification programs have the ability to take away someone's ability to put food on their table. That's pretty serious stuff. And when you're doing that, you really have to have your ducks in a row, both professionally and legally. Now, this all came to a head back in the 1970s when a group of nurses sued at the federal level for bias. And we're not talking about sexual bias. We're just talking about bias in the examinations. There was bias that there was an unfairness in the way that exams were developed. And that was upheld by the courts at the federal level. And when that came out, it grew this entire industry that we call credentialing, testing industry, that began to develop what we call these psychometric standards. And psychometrics is simply a fancy term that simply means accurately measuring and validating mental capacity and processes. And it's an interesting concept. It's a little bit different for certification programs, but what measure can we use to be able to know what's inside of that head of yours that you can actually go out and operate in the field? And that's why just simply passing exam is not enough in the field of psychometrics to grant a certification. You have to have relevant experience and relevant education before you're even allowed to take the exam. So these standards built up, and as they built up, it grew to where we are today, which is developing what we call, a term we call is legally defensible exams. I think everyone would agree that we live in a highly litigious society. People tend to want to challenge things legally and be able to come out ahead. If I fail the exam, failing the exam is not my fault. It was your fault because you created a bad exam, so I'm going to sue you and I'm going to earn my certification. So you really have to have your ducks in a row. And that grew to what we do today with exam development. Now, when I first got into the credentialing industry about 20 years ago, our goal back then, I think it was a lofty goal, was to create the perfect exam. Well, if there's anything you've learned through the years when you get involved in this industry, there is no thing as the perfect exam. It just does not exist. And something doesn't have to be perfect to be valid. The valid portion of it, you need to have what's called an airtight process in how those exams and how the program is developed. Without that, your program kind of falls apart at the seams. And that's why we have so many testing clients that use ABC standardized exams as a key component of their program, because developing legally defensible exams is a very time-consuming process, and even more importantly, a very expensive process. And again, I used to think it was just people sitting around in the room just inventing questions. That's not how it works. It really begins, and I'm going to hit this at kind of a high level with the key components. It starts out with what we call a job task analysis. You talk to people in the industries and they'll say, when was your latest JTA? And all a job task analysis is a survey. Some of you may have participated in that. ABC has performed dozens of job task analysis over the years. And a job task analysis is put together by subject matter experts. It's a whole big group of them there on the screen that you see. They're having, you can tell by the looks on their faces, they definitely enjoy what they're doing. And what a job task analysis breaks down is you've got a survey, and that survey is comprehensive. It might take you 2 hours to complete it. And it lays out every single thing that's performed by a given operator. Do you turn that valve? Do you adjust that process? Do you fix that pump? And then it's broken down. Do you assess the problem? Do you actually have hands-on experience fixing that problem? Do you monitor this process? Do you adjust this process? And then that's broken down by 4 different groupings of 4 different certification holders. Are you a grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4? That's sent out and filled out typically by tens of thousands of operators across North America and across the globe. That comes back, and then that is, the number crunching is done on that by psychometricians and staff, and has worked with the subject matter experts to develop what we call an exam blueprint. And you've probably seen the ABC need to know criteria. It's available on ABC's website for every exam that's given. And what that does is lays out what came out of the exam blueprint to say, as a grade 2 operator, you need to know about this process to this level. At a grade 1 or a grade 2, you need to understand questions that are about monitoring it. About grade 3, you need to be able to troubleshoot it, and so on and so forth. It's a very complex process to develop that. Once that exam blueprint is made, part of that blueprint lays out that there shall be 3 questions, and typically on the wastewater side of the house a lot, so I'll throw it out. There need to be 3 questions on activated sludge. There needs to be 5 questions on chemical process dosing, those types of things. And then what will happen is, while ABC already has thousands of exam questions in their item bank, those need to be revalidated and built anew. So we have what we call exam development workshops for the people you see on your screen. In fact, that was at the conclusion of a multi-day exam development workshop in Olathe, Kansas, right there, where those teams disappeared in rooms and did nothing for 12 hours a day, but wrote exam questions. It was all laid out to say, these are the areas where we need new questions built. And it's there's a lot that goes in there. There's a lot of training that goes into being able to write valid questions. How do you write a valid STEM? How do you write valid distractors that are acceptable? After all that's done, it goes back to the psychometricians and gets crunched from a legal standpoint, and then goes back to the subject matter experts for review. Then the exam is developed. And when the exam is put out, then that's still not done. Then the questions on the exam actually need to be what we call pre-tested. We want to get performance evaluation on those questions to see how they perform in the field before we put them on a valid exam. That's why current standardized exams now have 110 questions on them instead of 100. You're graded on the 100 validated questions, but the other 10, which you don't know which they are on the exam, are for developing numbers to be able to determine what we call p-value. P-value just simply means passing value. If a certain question only has a 20% passing value, it's looked at by staff and the subject matter expert to say, is there something about this that could be deceiving that needs to be reworded? So by the time you see an actual exam, just laying out how much work has actually gone into developing that exam and developing that that program to put that forth. It's not something somebody just pulled that off the shelf. That's why you don't see people challenging exam questions. That used to be a common thing back 20 years ago. You say, I'm going to challenge number 32 and see what happens with it. It doesn't work that way anymore because of the way the psychometric process works. Through that, and this is no different than if you were taking a professional engineer exam or a lawyer exam or an accountant exam. There's just not opportunities to say, I don't like question 32 and I'm gonna write a problem. I'm gonna write about that. It just doesn't work that way anymore. So I hope this helps you understand where we were and where we've come to and why we're at where we're at today. So we don't try to make our goal is not to make your life difficult, but our goal is to ensure that the public is assured that they can turn on their water and be able to drink what comes out of the tap, and they can flush their toilet and know that they can take their kids swimming and they can go fishing out in the stream and they don't have to worry about anything harmful happening to them. The last thing I want to touch on today is the professional operator program. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I spoke for about a half hour on it when I was with you in St. Lucia at the CAWASA conference back in 2019. The certification program is actually developed by what we call an independent credentialing standard. You typically don't have a governing body of an organization oversee the credentialing program, because you have to be able to demonstrate that every person that's involved on that board has acceptable experience to be able to serve in the role that they serve at for the certification program. In ABC's case, the bylaws were changed to create an independent commission. You've probably heard of it before. It's called the Certification Commission for Environmental Professionals, or in short, we just simply say C2EP. I actually chair that commission, and on the screen there on the right, you see Andrew Houlihan. Andrew Houlihan is one of our commissioners. He oversees the drinking water treatment portion of that, and underneath him are a couple of dozen drinking water scheme committee members that actually put together the drinking water portion of the program. So very highly organized. My hat's off to ABC staff who somehow keep us organized through this and keep us focusing forward, because like in any certification program, we all have day jobs that we need to focus on at the same time. Now, ABC developed this independent program, and the interesting thing about it is that this program was actually driven by you, the operators. This wasn't driven by the credentialing agency. This wasn't driven by allied organizations like WEF and AWWA. While they fully support it, this was driven by operators. So this program was essentially built by operators and for operators. This program is for you. And the goal of this program is not to supplant regulatory certification programs, but rather it transcends and encompasses those programs. For you as the operator, It increases your professionalism and it increases your recognition, because if there is an industry that are the unsung heroes, it's the drinking water and wastewater operators throughout the world. Those are to me, those are the heroes. The heroes to me are not the people standing out front with signs and protesting environmental issues. They may serve a key role, but when I think about the heroes, I think about the hero that's working on Christmas Eve, that's keeping my drinking water safe, and I don't even know what his or her name is. Those are the heroes in the program. And a lot of people don't understand, and this is why it works out so well for people to earn dual credentialing, is that the standardized exams that we develop as C2EP are the same standardized exams that are marketed by ABC to regulatory certification programs across the globe. So when you're taking a exam to earn a credential in a state or a province or another country, you also have the opportunity to be able to take the same exam and earn your professional designation. That's a big deal. Engineers work hard to be able to put PE after their name. Accountants do the same, to put the letters after their name. And the same with operators. Today, I see very proud operators that want to be able to sign and be able to say, my name is Bill Smith, PO, professional operator. And that's what you earn by getting your professional operator designation. Now, that website that you see right there, I'd encourage you to visit it after the webinar is over. It's called professionaloperator.org. And that is a site that was custom developed by ABC and C2EP specifically for the professional operator program. You'll find some great resources on there, and you don't have to be a professional operator to take advantage of those resources. I'm going to touch on them here real quick, but you'll find info about the program itself, what's required, what the education requirements are, continuing education requirements, what is it that you need. There's a career center where you can look at different job openings. There's an operator blog where operators can share problems that they're having, saying, I'm having a problem with this process, I don't know what to do. There's an open forum to be able to discuss the same issues. And the last one I really wanted to hit on, because a lot of people don't know about this, and that's the PO portal. And I know a lot of operators in my state, in Nevada, have taken advantage of this, and you don't have to have a PO to be able to use this. You can create an account for yourself, and in that PO portal, you can upload all of your continuing education that you earn and house that all in one place. So when it comes time for your certification renewal and you need to access that, you're not looking for it on a file on your computer that may not be backed up. You're not looking for it in an office drawer at work to find your certificates. What operators are doing is they make electronic copies of those. They upload that to the PO portal. They enter the relevant information of what they took. And when it comes time to renew their certification, they just pull it down. I know one operator that entered, I think, 10 or 15 years worth of information on there. Basically everything in their resume they put on there so that they now have it all available in one place and in an organized fashion to be able to access that. So I'm kind of spending a little extra time on that. I don't know if I touched on that a lot when I was with you in St. Lucia, but that's a big advantage to you. And I would encourage you to be a part of that, whether you decide to pursue obtaining a professional operator designation or not. That site is available and that portal is available to create an account for you. So with that, that covers the information that I had. I don't know if anybody has any questions that they wish to ask about anything. I'm here available to be able to answer any questions. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have ABC staff on the line who would be more than happy to answer any staff related questions.
Thank you, John. That was absolutely fabulous presentation as usual. And I know that not many of the operators may have been in St. Lucia, so I think some of what you presented would have been useful in any way. And I'd also like to thank the ABC team who are on with us this evening. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. And it's a first, and it's good, and we're happy to have you. And sure, we will offer an opportunity once again sometime in the future to have ABC partnering with us on our webinar. I don't know if the participants would wish to pose any questions at this time. Please go ahead if you do. There are no questions in the chat, and I'm not seeing any questions in the chat room and not seeing any hands up. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, John, and for giving us your time this evening, and also to apologize again for the inconveniences of the technical glitches that we had in the start.
No problem. I'm glad it worked out. No worries at all on the tech glitches.
And of course, we have recorded the session so that we will make it available to you and the ABC and the participants, because there's a lot of information they can always come back to our site and find from what you have presented. So once again, have a good evening. Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll catch up in the near future.
Thank you, Ignatius. Appreciate it.
Right, and keep safe, everyone.
You too.
Okay. This has been the end of the CAWASA Wednesday webinar, session number 2 for 2021. Bye.